Did you catch the thing with Greg Palast at all? He had this thing with Noam Chomsky and Amy Goodman, which is basically kind of inspired by his book that came out earlier this year called "How Trump Stole 2020." Have you seen? You know Greg
No.
Palast?
Yeah, I know who you're
Yeah,
talking about, but no, I
yeah,
haven't
yeah.
seen
He
it.
writes
Yeah.
for like Rolling Stone, and did write for the BBC. He's basically an independent journalist, and sometimes he's criticized for being too facile with his conclusions or whatever. But he actually successfully sued the state of Georgia to release the names of voters that they had purged from the voter lists, and this was what Governor Brian Kemp had done in Georgia, and basically they had purged more than 500,000 names from the voter rolls. So what they do is they send out like a postcard, to everybody on the voter rolls, and if it gets sent back, they assume that person has moved or whatever, and they just purge them from the voter rolls. And obviously, people who move more often are going to be disproportionately people of a
Right.
lower
Well, but
socioeconomic
it was
status.
also, wasn't it also the whole thing that, especially with people of color or Hispanic people in general, you know how like Maria is a very popular name, so they would take out, because there's like a Maria Alvarez
Right? How many
that's
how many
located here
Hernandezes
and
are
then
there?
located in another county. They would say it's the same person, and then they strike them both out, right?
Right. So people would actually
Right.
show up to vote, and then they would say, well, you can't vote. We can give you a provisional ballot, which is probably not going to be counted. So one of the things that Greg Palast recommended, which I think is a really good idea, is actually, check with your go online and check with your state to make sure you are actually registered to vote. And encourage others to do the same, because you can't just take it for granted that you're going to be that you're going to show up on
Well,
election day and your name's going to be there.
well, and that's the same thing that happened to a lot of Bernie voters in Brooklyn, right? In 2016, hundreds of thousands of them.
Right. And it's been going on
Yeah.
since 2000, basically. It's been going on a lot
Right.
longer than that. LBJ in the Senate race in 1948 was a classic case of election fraud. But I mean, it's been going on with both parties, and not
Yeah.
just limited to this country, obviously.
Mhm.
It's been going on for years and years. But like 2000, basically they stopped the recount because it was becoming clear that that Gore was going to win in Florida, and the Supreme Court, ruled 5-4 in favor of Bush.
Right.
And in
Absolutely.
2004
Yeah.
there was Greg Palast wrote The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, and he talked about the election of 2004. And I don't know if I think 2004 was one where actually it's pretty clear that Bush did not win in 2004, but even the electoral college, we're not talking just about popular vote, but there's so much election fraud that goes on with both parties, obviously. And this is
Both parties.
election day and
Which is
primaries.
not to be conflated with voter fraud,
Oh, voter fraud, right.
which is what Trump and his people always like to bring up. They like to bring up voter
Well,
fraud,
if you go to the
this
Heritage
rampant
Foundation,
problem that we have
if you go to
of
the
voter
Heritage
fraud.
Foundation website, the Heritage Foundation, the conservative think tank, if you go to their website, and you look under electoral politics, whatever, the main problem is, voter fraud, because we have to have voter ID laws and all these things, because people show up and they're going to vote, 3 times, and they're going to vote in multiple
Even though
counties.
that's a felony crime. So the fact that somebody would commit a felony crime just to vote, it seems a bit odd.
Well,
I
and
mean,
then
just a little bit,
the few cases that they uncovered from like the
Yeah.
last election were actually Trump people who voted, for
Well,
Trump multiple times. So
yeah,
really,
but so that might be. But the fact is that people will rig elections if they
Yeah.
have any opportunity. Whether it's Debbie Wasserman Schultz dumping truckloads of ballots when Tim Kavanaugh is hot on her trail about the election fraud
Tim
there, or
Canova.
whatever. What did I say? Yeah, Tim
Tim
Canova.
Kavanaugh.
Sorry, thank you, Tim Canova. Um, People will, if they can rig an election, they will rig an election, and they have been doing so ever since the Greeks. Somebody threw a couple of rocks out of the bowl or whatever.
hey, give the Greeks more credit than that. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredible to me. Why would you give people credit? Why would you allow them to vote if you don't serve them the rest of the time you're in office? Like, why would you suddenly, honor wishes through the ballot box. Obviously, it's something to be manipulated, and in whatever way, shape, or form possible. This is just.
Oh, sure.
And the other thing is the electronic voting, right? So, I mean, that's another thing, because that could be totally manipulated. With or without a paper backup. Obviously, it's better if you have a paper backup. But
And
how many
I think it
recounts do you
is.
actually have? With a paper backup, unless it's very, very close. But like, there's cases with the electronic voting. I mean, there's no. You could just, there's a back door. It takes a high school kid, like, whatever, 20 minutes to get into the system and change the results. I mean, how can we have trust in our democracy? And I just think we work this campaign, and then you naively think somehow your vote
Right.
counts, but they're actively fighting
you need
against
to
it.
have. I mean,
See,
a paper receipt for every voter, and I mean, there's some things that
There are ways to do it.
absolutely things that ought
Ways,
to happen.
and ranked voting is another thing
Right.
that would obviously increase democracy. But
And
I
I
mean,
think neither of the duopoly parties will do anything about that, because they both see opportunities that they can rig the game in some places.
well, they're not serving the people. I mean, they're afraid, they're afraid that our troops are going to get pulled out of Afghanistan. If it's going to be the domino effect, we pull out of Afghanistan, we might pull out of,
Right.
out of some other place. And it's a slippery
and then
slope.
you have the issue. Then you have the issue of mail-in voting, right? Which that is the big thing this year, because with the pandemic that's happening or will happen, by that time, obviously to have places, have especially the elderly people go to these voting places and then get sick and all this kind of stuff. So there's this big push for mail-in voting. But the issue, at least what we just saw recently, wasn't that one of the reasons why Charles Booker, that he ended up supposedly losing, was because of the fact that he got really hot towards the end of it. Like, he
Right.
really picked up a lot of steam towards the end. But by that time, a lot of people had already mailed in their votes. So
Right.
because you have so much time to
Yeah.
do the mail-in
Right.
voting, things can change. So there should be some sort of, I guess, like, you can't really, like, you have to have all of the deadlines for your debates and all that kind of stuff before you start the mail-in voting.
Well, or just, I mean, it's based on the postmark date, right? So as long as you mail it by election day, it counts. I think there should be a clear.
Right, but what I'm saying is that what happened with Booker was that because
Right, I understand what you're saying.
he ended up picking up steam after a lot of people had already ended up sending
Right, but
in
if you say you have to stop all the debates by a certain time, what happened if some major event occurs the day before the election? They can't make a statement on that or whatever. I'm just saying, why not tell voters? It's on the voters too. They should know they have until election day. You don't have to make a decision 2 weeks ahead. You can do that. I mean, you can wait until the day of the election day to actually mail your ballot. Now the question is, do you get a ballot? Because if you're purged from the list, they're not going to mail you a ballot to fill in, to send in. And some states require postage, right, which is like a poll tax. So you have to pay if you have postage due, your ballot they won't deliver your ballot.
I'm kind of horrified by the whole idea. We're talking about I really don't want I want a paper ballot, and I don't want it to move any more than 100 feet while I'm in the polling place from where I vote to put it in a machine, and no human hand touches it until it's being counted. The idea of it going through a mailing sorting room and all this kind of stuff, I'm completely horrified by that.
But then you also have the issue of how it's counted, right? Because that's also proprietary software.
That should be there should be more cameras on that than there are on Ghislaine Maxwell right now. So yeah, at least one.
That's working.
That's working.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that it should be hand counted, and there are cameras that show it, and it should be aired on TV live for people to see it, in their counties or whatever. I'm sure that it's not going to be the most highly rated show, but at least the people who are really interested in election integrity,
and everyone sitting at home with their paper receipt that could be used if folks needed to make a case that there's no way the count was that way.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I mean, if there's a, whatever, if it's like they say it's going to be like a landslide for Biden, which, who knows, whatever.
No
But,
way.
first of all, I think it's going to be a lot closer. And in fact, Greg Palast thinks Trump is going to win. Michael Moore thinks Trump is going to win. Uh, you know, going to quote unquote win. That the result, he's going to win those key states, like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, whatever, Michigan, and going to win the electoral college. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me if there's like a over, if it's a route, it's kind of hard to orchestrate that for the other side. But
Yeah.
I mean,
with all these things happening, I think it's unknowable. I mean, if Trump can do something like this, like say horrible authoritarian abuse of power in Portland,
Right.
and the Dems are completely capable of matching that in thick-headedness. I mean, I would say if people were paying attention that the blocking pulling out of Afghanistan after 20 years and $1 trillion should be that. That it can go any way. But Biden hasn't even, I mean, 3 days ago, he made kind of a prepared economic something or other. He's still in hiding, and he still has dementia as far as I'm concerned. I just see such little ability to think on the fly. And he does the same thing so often where he drops his train of thought and then he says, the thing, he fills in with something,
right.
He just like loses his train of thought, and that's going to become apparent, if he ever shows his face.
Well, in the debates, I mean, if there are debates,
well, they're making excuses not to have debates now, right? Tom Friedman on the New York Times is saying he shouldn't do debates unless Trump shows his taxes. They're already trying to pave a way for him to excuse himself out of it.
Right.
So.
But I mean, the question is like, whatever the result's going to be, whatever the result is it, but it's not necessarily the result of what people actually vote for. It's basically, it's this corrupt election system, that may or may not reflect what people, I mean, first of all, just the electoral college itself is anti-democratic, right? But, beyond that, with digital voting machines and voter suppression and reduced number of polling places and all these things, and purging voters from the rolls. I mean, all these things contribute to less.
I just got this mental image of what's that game, Pinochet or something like that, where you drop 100 balls at the bottom and they hit all these random pins and drop all over the place. It just kind of feels like our voting system is essentially that crazy in trying to determine the who the winner should be.